The sun rose reluctantly over a shattered horizon, its light dull and diffused through a thick veil of pollution that clung to the broken earth like a shroud. The once vibrant cities of Earth now lay in ruins, sprawling expanses of debris and desolation stretching as far as the eye could see. Twisted metal skeletons of skyscrapers pierced the skyline, their glass facades long since shattered, leaving gaping holes that moaned with the wind. Beneath these towering relics, nature had begun to reclaim her territory. Vines crept over crumbling walls and wildflowers peeked through cracks in the asphalt, a stark contrast to the occasional mechanical whir of alien drones that surveyed the land from above. These drones, sleek and ominous, cast long shadows over the ground, reminders of the Zaltraxion Empire's watchful eye. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay, mixed with the faint, acrid tang of alien technology, a constant reminder of the invaders who now ruled this planet. In the distance, the sea lapped at a littered shore, its waves tainted with the wreckage of human endeavor, sunken ships, plastic remnants, and the skeletons of marine creatures now rare and precious. Jack stood atop a small hill, his eyes scanning the landscape. His face, weathered by years of hardship and exposure, bore a quiet resolve. Around him, the land was littered with remnants of humanity's past glory. Overturned vehicles half buried in the earth, digital billboards long dimmed, and personal belongings scattered and forgotten. Each object told a story of a sudden, tragic halt in daily life, a moment frozen in time when the invasion turned everything to chaos. In the background, the faint hum of a labor camp began its daily crescendo, a discordant symphony of clanking machinery and muted human voices. Jack's gaze lingered on the horizon, where the dark silhouette of a Zaltraxion control tower stood imposingly. It was a stark monument to the new order, its surface smooth and impenetrable, unlike the jagged, broken lines of the human constructions. He turned away, his boots crunching on a mix of soil and debris as he began his descent towards the camp. With each step, a cloud of dust rose, settling slowly back onto the ground, a ground scarred by conflict and occupation, yet still unmistakably Earth. This was his home, now a shadow of its former self. But Jack held on to a glimmer of something indefinable, hope, perhaps, or defiance. As he walked, the wind picked up, carrying whispers of the past, the sounds of a bustling world now silenced. But in the howling of the wind, there was also a promise, a hint of change, as if the earth itself was waiting, holding its breath for the moment when its children would rise again. The labor camp stirred to life as the first pale light of dawn crept over the jagged landscape, casting long, thin shadows across the makeshift dwellings of the enslaved humans. Jack's day began, as always, with the harsh blare of the alien alarm system, a piercing electronic shriek that signaled the start of another day of toil under the watchful eyes of the Zaltraxian overseers. Jack emerged from his small, dilapidated shelter, a repurposed container with rusted edges and a door that never quite shut right. Inside, the space was sparse, with a makeshift bed, a few personal items, and old tools he had managed to salvage and repair. He took a moment to straighten his worn jacket, the fabric patched from various scraps he'd found over the years, each piece a testament to his resilience. Outside, Jack joined a slowly moving line of humans, their faces drawn and tired, their clothes similarly patched and faded. They shuffled towards the central distribution area where thin gruel was handed out in small recycled containers. The food was barely palatable, nutritionally engineered to sustain them with the minimum necessary for survival, yet another method of control by the Zaltraxians. "Morning, Jack," a voice said softly beside him. It was Lena, a young woman with sharp eyes and a quiet strength about her. Jack nodded in response, managing a small smile. "You're up early today." "Couldn't sleep again," Jack replied, his voice low. "Dreams of the old world." They collected their breakfast and moved to sit on a series of worn benches, all repurposed from old industrial parts. As they ate, they spoke in hushed tones about their tasks for the day. Jack was assigned to the salvage crew, a group responsible for sorting through the wreckage of human cities, recovering anything the Zaltraxians deemed useful. The work was grueling and dangerous. Jack and his crew were transported to a nearby city ruin, where collapsed buildings and unstable structures made every step a risk. They wore basic safety gear, much of it as patched and worn as their clothing, providing little protection against the hazards they faced daily. Throughout the day, Jack's mind was always alert, not just to the physical dangers of his work, but also to the opportunities it presented. He had become adept at spotting useful items among the debris, bits of wire, broken electronics, even old books, that he could squirrel away without the guards noticing. Each item was a small victory, a tiny piece of independence and resistance. As he worked, Jack was careful to maintain the appearance of compliance, keeping his head down when the Zaltraxian guards floated by on their anti-gravity platforms, their eyes hidden behind reflective visors, their weapons always ready. The guards communicated in a series of clicks and whirs, a language that sounded mechanical and alien to human ears. By midday, the sun was high and relentless, its heat magnified by the concrete and metal around them. The crew took a short break, huddling in the shade of a partially collapsed overpass. Here, they shared water from a communal tank, the liquid warm and metallic tasting but vital for survival. In these moments of rest, the conversation often turned to memories of Earth before the invasion, to families and friends lost or separated during the chaos. Jack listened more than he spoke, his thoughts often drifting to his own family, to his parents and younger sister, whose fates remained unknown. These memories fueled his resolve as much as they haunted him. As the workday ended and the crew was transported back to the camp, Jack felt the familiar mix of exhaustion and determination. He looked around at his fellow humans, their faces etched with fatigue, and he knew he was not alone in his feelings of loss and defiance. Tonight, as they gathered around a small fire, exchanging stories and plans under the stars, Jack would share the small treasures he had found, each one sparking a tiny flame of hope in the gathering darkness. The weary crew trudged back into the labor camp as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows through the high, electrified fences that surrounded the compound. The camp was a sprawling enclosure, segmented into various sections by more fencing, each part serving a different purpose in the grim economy of the camp. As they passed through the security checkpoint, a series of drones hovered overhead, scanning each worker with biometric precision to ensure no unauthorized materials were brought back. Jack skillfully concealed the small treasures he'd salvaged, tucked away in hidden pockets and under false bottoms in his tool bag. His heart beat a little faster as a drone paused over him, but it moved on after a moment, its sensors not detecting his hidden cache. Inside the camp, the atmosphere was a blend of resignation and subdued defiance. The living quarters were to one side, rows of makeshift shelters, each as battered and worn as the people who called them home. The center of the camp held the communal areas, a mess hall, a rudimentary clinic staffed by fellow prisoners with medical experience, and a small open area where a fire pit had been dug into the earth for the rare occasions when they could gather socially. Jack and Lena parted ways at the junction leading to their respective shelters. "Stay sharp, Lena," Jack murmured, his eyes scanning the nearby guard tower unconsciously. "You too, Jack? See you at the fire tonight?" She replied, a hint of something more than camaraderie in her tone. "I'll be there," he confirmed, heading to his quarters. As he walked, Jack took in the details of the camp with a critical eye. High above, watchtowers loomed, manned by Zaltraxian guards. Their alien features were obscured by the setting sun, which silhouetted them against the dimming sky, making them appear more as monuments to oppression than living, watching beings. The perimeter was patrolled continuously, the guards equipped with advanced weaponry that made any thought of escape seem like fantasy. But it was within these constraints that Jack had learned to find small freedoms. He reached his shelter and quickly secured his day's findings in a hidden compartment beneath the floorboard before washing up at the communal wash area. The water was always cold and slightly tinged with rust, but it was refreshing after a long day of labor. Evening in the camp brought a different energy as the oppressive heat of the day faded into cooler air. The workers, having returned from various assignments, started to emerge from their shelters, moving towards the mess hall for their evening meal. The food was unremarkable, designed for sustenance rather than enjoyment, but it was a moment when everyone could sit together, share news, and reinforce the bonds that the harsh environment tried so hard to break. After eating, Jack joined a small group heading to the fire pit. The gathering at the fire was a nightly ritual, a time for sharing more than just the physical warmth of the flames. Stories were told here, plans quietly made, and friendships strengthened. Tonight, as they sat around the flickering fire, the group was larger than usual, the recent successful salvage raising spirits and fostering a rare sense of community. The fire crackled, casting playful shadows on their faces as they spoke in low, cautious tones. Jack listened to the others, sharing in their laughter and their quieter moments of sorrow. When it was his turn, he pulled out a small hudon, battered electronic device he had found, a relic of the old world, possibly a music player. Its discovery had brought him a sense of victory, a small piece of the past that could perhaps bring joy again. As he passed it around, the group marveled at the find, each touch a reminder of what had been and what could be again. Jack watched their faces, the firelight reflecting in their eyes, and felt a strengthening of the resolve that had carried him through another day. Tonight, they were not just survivors, but remnants of humanity, burning bright against the darkness of their captors. After the gathering around the fire, the camp slowly settled into the night. Jack returned to his shelter, the warmth from the fire still lingering in his bones, contrasting sharply with the coolness of the evening air. Inside the cramped space that served as both his bedroom and sanctuary, he sat down on the edge of his makeshift bed, a worn mattress supported by a frame he had cobbled together from scraps. The shelter was dim, lit only by a small, battery-powered lamp he had managed to repair. Its light cast long, dancing shadows against the metal walls, creating a play of light and darkness that mirrored the tumult within him. Jack leaned back against the wall, his eyes drifting to a small, crudely made shelf above his bed where he kept a few personal treasures, a faded photograph of his family, a tattered book on ancient human history, and a few mechanical parts he had turned into a sort of abstract art. In these quiet moments, Jack's mind often wandered to the past. He remembered the world as it had been before the invasion. Vibrant, chaotic, alive. His childhood memories were a jumble of colors and sounds. The blue of the ocean on a sunny day, the laughter of his sister as they played in the fields behind their house, the bustling sounds of the city that had been their home. Now, all that remained of that world were these fragmented memories, pieces he clung to like a raft in the vast ocean of his current reality. Jack's gaze settled on the photograph of his family. They had been separated during the initial chaos of the invasion, and he had no way of knowing their fate. The pain of that uncertainty was a constant ache, a hollow space inside him that he filled with resolve and anger against the invaders. He touched the photograph gently, tracing the outlines of his parents and sister with a calloused finger. "I'll find you," he whispered to them, a promise he had made every night for years. "I'll bring us back together." Turning away from the photograph, Jack pulled out a small, battered notebook from under his mattress. Here, he recorded everything of note: observations about the camp, sketches of the Zaltraxian technology, thoughts on potential weaknesses in their armor. Each entry was written in a careful, coded script that only he could understand. Tonight, he added details about the electronic device he had found, considering how it might be repaired or repurposed. His mind buzzed with ideas, his engineering skills, a gift from his father who had been an inventor, finding some use even in these dire circumstances. But more than plans and memories, the night was a time for Jack to steel himself for the days ahead. The quiet of his shelter allowed him to gather his thoughts, to fortify his spirit against the challenges he faced daily. It was during these hours that Jack's resolve hardened, his strategy refined, and his leadership qualities honed. He knew he was more than a survivor or a scavenger. He was a leader in the making, a catalyst for change. Finally, setting the notebook aside, Jack lay down, staring up at the ceiling of his shelter. The metal was cold and unyielding, yet it had become familiar, almost comforting. As sleep began to claim him, his thoughts drifted towards hope, a dangerous, powerful thing that the Zaltraxians had not yet managed to strip away. Tonight, like every night, Jack fell asleep with a vision of a freed Earth in his mind, the dream both a balm and a beacon, guiding him towards a future he was determined to make real. The following morning broke with a harsh, metallic light filtering through the haze that perpetually hung over the camp. As the workers shuffled towards their assigned duties, the alien presence was more palpable than ever. an oppressive weight that bore down on every human soul in the enclosure. At the center of the camp, near the main control building, stood several Zaltraxian overlords. Their figures were imposing, tall, with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered with a metallic sheen under the morning sun. Their faces were a smooth expanse, devoid of visible ears or noses, with large, unblinking eyes that seemed to take in everything with cold detachment. Jack passed by them on his way to the salvage crew assembly point, careful to keep his gaze lowered, yet taking in every detail. The Zaltraxians wore sleek armor that integrated advanced technology, control panels on their wrists, and weapons that hung at their sides, humming with latent power. Even their movements were fluid and precise, betraying an otherworldly grace that belied their strength and brutality. One of the overlords, whom the workers had nicknamed Watcher, due to his habit of lingering around the human quarters, turned his head slightly as Jack walked past. His gaze, piercing and inquisitive, followed Jack for a few moments before shifting away, disinterested or satisfied that Jack posed no immediate threat. As Jack joined his crew, a low hum filled the air, a drone passing overhead, its cameras surveying the line of humans. It was a constant reminder of the surveillance they were under, the complete lack of privacy and autonomy. Whispered rumors among the workers spoke of the Zaltraxians' ability to listen in, even on whispered conversations. Though whether this was true or just paranoia, Jack couldn't be sure. Today's task took them closer to the control building, a massive structure of alien design that stood at the heart of the camp. Its walls were composed of a smooth, dark material that seemed to absorb light, making it appear as a blot against the morning sky. Guarded by more Zaltraxian soldiers, entry was restricted to the aliens themselves and a few human collaborators, those who had chosen cooperation over resistance, much to the disdain of their fellow captives. Jack's work near the building gave him a chance to observe the coming and going of the Zaltraxians. He noted the shift changes, the arrival of supply shuttles, and the rare and brief interactions between different ranks of their hierarchy. Each piece of information was a potential tool, something that might one day be used to their advantage. As he worked, Jack was approached by Mira, a member of his crew known for her sharp mind and quiet observation skills. "They brought in new tech today," she murmured, nodding subtly towards a group of Zaltraxians unloading crates from a shuttle. "Looks different. More advanced." Jack nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "Keep an eye on it. Any detail could be crucial," he instructed quietly. The day wore on, heavy and slow, under the watchful eyes of their overlords. The Zaltraxians interacted little with the humans, except to issue orders through their translation devices, which rendered their voices into a flat, emotionless monotone that echoed oddly in the open air. By the time the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the camp, Jack felt the weight of exhaustion on his shoulders. But beneath that fatigue was a growing sense of purpose. Every day spent under the Zaltraxians' rule was another day closer to understanding their technology, their habits, and their weaknesses. That evening, as Jack returned to his shelter, his thoughts were not on the harsh conditions of the camp, but on the overlords themselves. Understanding the enemy was the first step to defeating them, and Jack was determined to use every opportunity, every observation, to pave the way toward rebellion.